The world is in peril. Across the globe, we have seen several instances of climate catastrophe. Be it in Pakistan, where half the country was inundated with water after monsoon rain, or in China, where extreme droughts were experienced across the nation, or in the UK, which recorded the highest ever temperature of 40.2 degrees Celsius. The list of such climate-related instances is long. And to address these pressing concerns, after more than 2 years of COVID-19 restrictions, global leaders have assembled in New York to attend the United Nations General Assembly. Speaking at the opening of the annual high-level meeting in New York, the UN Chief Antonio Guterres has now urged rich countries to tax windfall profits of fossil fuel companies for climate damage and use that money instead to help countries harmed by the climate crisis, as well as help those who are struggling with rising food and energy costs.
It's high time to put fossil fuel producers, investors and enablers on notice. Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices.
The question of who funds these losses has long dogged international negotiations. Poor countries say the rich should pay because of their historic carbon emissions. According to a report, developed countries are responsible for 79% of historical carbon emissions. While Britain has passed a 25% windfall tax on oil and gas producers in the North Sea, lawmakers in the US have also discussed a similar idea. However, it faces long odds in Congress. At the United Nations General Assembly, the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said that climate change was the greatest threat affecting our nations and our peoples. Listen in.
Climate change is the greatest threat affecting our nations and our peoples. There is no other problem so global in nature that it requires a united effort, one led by the United Nations. The effects of climate change are uneven and reflect an historical injustice. Those who are least responsible suffer the most.
The Philippines is among the developing nations responsible for just a fraction of greenhouse gas emissions, and despite their minimum contribution towards climate damage, the country witnessed harsh effects of climate change-related events. Severe tropical storm named Maun that brought along heavy rains and strong winds battered its northern provinces, resulting in widespread devastation. According to reports, the world's most vulnerable countries are now preparing to take on the richest economies with a demand for urgent finance. Sources say that these vulnerable countries have prepared a discussion document for high-level meeting in New York. The document looks to a climate-related and justice-based global tax as a means of raising finance. Among the options are a carbon tax, a tax on airline travel, and a levy on the heavy oils used in shipping. For years now, global leaders have made tall promises. When it comes to tackle the climate crisis, it is happening at the UNGA now. And it happened even at the COP26 summit in Glasgow last year. World leaders agreed that there should be a new framework to deal with the issue. But once these global summits and meetings end, the promises and commitments made seem long forgotten, especially amid other global issues. The world is yet to witness a decisive collective action to save our planet. And now for more perspective, joining me now is Megan Darby from London. Megan is an editor at Climate Home News in the UK. Welcome to WION, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
My first question, let's begin by talking about the UN chief's statement, a grim statement urging rich countries to tax windfall profits of fossil fuel companies for climate damage. He says that the polluters must pay. Which countries is he referring to?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. And the polluters making the big windfall profits at the moment are the oil and gas producers, not all of which are developed countries. So in the developed world, you have the US, you have Canada, you have Norway as big oil producers, but also in the developing world, you have Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Nigeria. So it's not quite as simple as it's all rich countries that have these oil and gas profits to tax, but the kind of moral responsibility, the historic responsibility, sits primarily with those developed countries. So really looking at US and Canada would be the big oil and gas producers, to some extent Australia as well, that would fit in that category.
Right, absolutely, Megan. Thanks for that. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture here, from the floods in Pakistan to the heat wave in Europe. This year has seen some of the most devastating effects of climate change. But will we see these words and promises actually lead to any real change on ground, in your view?
Yeah, it's been very slow. Rich countries have been very slow to mobilize finance for loss and damage. And they are saying, oh, we already provide humanitarian aid, we already provide climate finance. They really don't want to open up a new channel specifically for the victims of climate disaster. But certainly the countries and the communities at the sharp end are saying humanitarian aid is not enough. It's not at scale, it's not predictable enough, and it's only reactive, and they really need support with things like early warning systems, so that these floods don't catch people off guard, so that people can prepare for them, and to rebuild. Pakistan has a huge bill for rebuilding after these floods, so that they can build back more resilient infrastructure,
right,
and be stronger against the next disaster.
Absolutely. Megan, thanks so much for all those inputs, and thanks for joining us on this broadcast. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.